Larry. Good morning to you.
Great googly moogly, and Bob's your uncle.
Thanks for coming. I did actually have an Uncle Bob.
Well, there you go.
He was my godfather. So you kind of nailed it.
I did. Yeah. On purpose, kind of, sort of.
Yeah, so how many different delegate districts have you served in your time, Larry? You must move around a lot.
I have not moved from where I live since 1991, but I've been in 3 districts, District 52, 59, and now 94.
All from redistricting?
All from redistricting.
Yeah, that can get confusing.
Yeah, I get confused a lot.
I'm not going to say anything about that. Yeah. Hey, congratulations to you. A piece of legislation you have long championed that finally did pass this year.
It did, and we're talking about the vehicular homicide. Interesting story with that. I was first interested in this when I went to work for the prison system in the state of Maryland in 91, when inmates came to me and said, I'm serving 40 years for murder. If I just run somebody over and said it was an accident, I could have got a lesser sentence. And then when I moved to West Virginia, I found out the situation was even worse. Not this session, but the session before. It really got to my attention. Berkeley County resident George Martincheck contacted me about the situation with his deceased wife, who was killed by a reckless driver. We had the legislation ready to go, session before last, had all the votes, but the chairman of the committee, Tom Fast, wouldn't give us a hearing. There was a slightly weaker version passed in the Senate. Same thing happened when it came over to the House. The Judiciary Chairman wouldn't give him a hearing. We had the votes. This year, we have a new chairman. Chairman was very open, and also Delegate Joe Funkhauser worked really hard taking a good bill and making it much more perfect. And it passed with nary a whisper, and the governor signed it.
Did you have much connection with Matt Harvey in this?
I had a couple conversations with him, not in depth, but in the session before last, I had some conversations with Matt, and he says, well, I don't understand why it can't be passed. And I said, I don't either. But it's just amazing. One person can tie up legislation, particularly if it's a chairman.
How frustrating is that as a delegate?
Oh, it's very frustrating. I don't mind when somebody says, I disagree, and I understand what the disagreement is, and you go on with that. I understand if somebody says, I just don't like you, and I'm not going to have that legislation passed. But when you don't get an answer at all, and when you know it's a good legislation, it's frustrating.
You knew the chairman. You had a decent relationship with the chairman, and he never gave you a reason why he wouldn't run?
Never gave me a reason, and Tom Fast I consider as a friend of mine. It's just one of those personality quirks. He didn't want anything to do with the legislation.
When does this kick in?
I'm not sure. Generally, legislation takes effect within 90 days after passage. At the latest, it'll be in July.
July 1?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the substantial changes it makes, as you understand?
Essentially, instead of getting just a reprimand or a fine, you can receive up to 10 years, depending on the circumstances. And I've had some pushback. Even a member of my own church says, "Oh, this is awful. If I'm negligent, I can go to prison." No, we're talking about reckless driving, not negligent. This gives more accountability to that kind of a situation. Unfortunately, it will not probably change behavior. We still have a problem with people being really reckless with their driving, not paying attention, being on the cell phone, just being idiots.
I think that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take much time out in the afternoon or the evening, morning, whatever, to see it all around you.
Blink of an eye, somebody can lose their life.
Bill.
Yeah, good morning, Larry. Larry, I'm intrigued a little bit about the districts you've lived in, not the 3 as much so as the spread, 52 up to 91. Does that mean we've grown that many districts in the last 15 years?
Well, no, we still have the same number of districts, 100, but the Eastern Panhandle has grown tremendously, and we've picked up a lot more delegates. So the Eastern Panhandle has many more delegates than they had in the past. So there has been growth. There's always just 100 under the Constitution in the House of Delegates, but the representation has shifted towards the Eastern Panhandle. Now, we're still not the majority, obviously, but we have many more delegates than we did before.
And we used to have, remember, there were multiple delegate districts.
Multiple
now we have
delegates.
all single-member delegate districts.
Now, Eastern Panhandle in recent history has always been single member, but down in, for instance, Kanawha County, they've had as many 10 delegates in one district.
Right.
And people ran as a pack, and I tell you, single member districts are more accountable to the members, and quite frankly, what we have in the state Senate, we have 2 senators per each district. I really think it would be better if we had 1 senator per district, same amount of senators, but a smaller district, more accountability.
Yeah, you actually, I remember talking to you about that in the previous cycle of elections. And is it getting any momentum?
No, there's some interest, and I've put in legislation on every year, but the opportunity for it to pass is probably between slim and none, and slim left town.
Mm-hmm.
And that's by statute and not constitution.
That's statute. No, it's Constitution. It's
So,
Constitution.
okay.
So it has to be a constitutional amendment. So that takes a 2/3 vote, and to get a 2/3 vote, and for some reason, the most pushback I get is from the senators.
Well, as you remember, when they had multiple House districts, the greatest pushback against that were the districts in Kanawha County.
That's right.
They did not want to change.
That's right, because they could run as a pack and not be accountable.
Yeah.
In fact, I have to give a shout out to John Overington. One of the things he did in his long-term service as a legislator, it used to be that all the votes in the House of Delegates were voice votes, so people could just say, "Oh yeah, I was for this," when they voted against it. He was the one that finally got the House of Delegates to be on roll call on all the final passage votes, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, and he's also one of the strongest advocates of single-member districts as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So if we are constitutionally locked in at 100 districts,
Right.
and Eastern Panhandle gained a few, where did they come from? Who lost?
Southern West Virginia mostly. It's the one that lost.
Is that one of the reasons we have a hard time getting Eastern Panhandle centric legislation passed? Are people?
Yeah, Eastern Panhandle is kind of an outlier in the rest of West Virginia. The culture in the Eastern Panhandle is very much different. When I first moved down to the state capitol for the session in 2010, when I was first elected, I was in at Mink Shoals gas station, and I paid for my gasoline and went in and talked to the guy, and he says, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Eastern Panhandle." He says, "Oh." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, I thought you sounded like a Yankee." And I said, "Excuse me?" He said, "Well, I didn't mean to offend you, none." I said, "I'm not offended. I just never been called a Yankee before." The culture in the Eastern Panhandle and the rest of the state is very, very different. And one of the things that we're very much interested in the Eastern Panhandle and in other parts of the growth parts of the state is locality pay. But the rest of the state, it's not a concern with them. So that's something we're going to have to continue to work at. Probably going to have a quid pro quo and marry it up with something else to get their votes.
But this has been attempted for the last couple 3 sessions, trying to find out. We'll give you something. For locality pay, but that has not yet been enough.
Not yet. It's a heavy lift.
Larry, one of the big complaints, I've been doing this show for 15 years, that I've heard, is the number of out-of-state license plates around the area. People who have not switched their registration over to West Virginia. And because of that, West Virginia is not collecting the fees on those items that they could be. And you had a bill, HB 2096, which gave authority to West Virginia law enforcement agencies to find individual owners who fail to register their vehicles that have been parked at their residence for more than 60 days.
Correct.
And that's in Judiciary, which is a committee you serve on. What kind of progress did you make with that?
Absolutely none. It's a big issue, and it's not just affecting Eastern Panhandle. All the outlying counties that border other states have an issue with that. And I'm not a big tax man. I absolutely oppose raising taxes. But if you're going to be eligible for a tax, you ought to pay it. When I drive by Marlowe Elementary, for instance, in the Falling Waters area, I see more out-of-state Maryland, Virginia tags than I do West Virginia tags. It's just not right. It's not fair. And I think we all ought to pay our fair share on that.
Yeah, not being for higher taxes doesn't mean you're not for people paying the taxes that they rightfully owe.
Exactamundo, as Fonzie said.
Yeah, and these folks owe the taxes, and this has been a long-standing complaint in this area, and it seems like it's an impossible roadblock to overcome to get people to switch their plates.
It is, and I get more complaints about that one issue than any other thing during the year. They come up to me in the post office, the grocery store, say, "What about these out-of-state tags?" They said, "I'm just sick of it." I am too.
Well, why would that not get any traction?
Well, you have...
Is it because of who you're allowing to do the fines?
No, I don't think so. You have to keep in mind you have 134 legislators and the governor. You have 134 strong egos and the governor. And, for instance, this year we had about 3,000 bills introduced and a little over 200 passed into law. And so it's difficult to thread the needle. This is a big issue. It's a big issue for the Eastern Panhandle. And I think it's an issue that if we get it to a committee vote would sail through easily, just like this vehicular homicide session before last. Had the votes, but couldn't get the committee chairman to
Isn't there already a law that people have to pay their taxes?
It is. But
so what would the new law do?
It would enforce it.
That doesn't make sense, Larry.
It would give some enforcement. I mean, just because you have a law, you have to have some repercussions.
But this has been something that's talked about for the last several years in Eastern Panhandle, but never requiring legislative action. It's something they can do themselves. So I'm surprised that we're now introducing a bill to do something that we have the authority to do already.
Well, let me read the summary of it again. Providing authority for West Virginia law enforcement agencies to fine individual vehicle owners who fail to register their vehicle that have been parked at their residence for more than 60 days.
Well, that's an element that's hard to prove.
Actually, not.
Parked at their residence for 60 days? I mean, what's the...
It's. I don't think it's any more difficult to prove than the meter maid who comes around and marks your car because you've been parked. Shocks your tires because you've been in the spot for 2 hours.
But doesn't the state have doesn't the local police have the authority to do that now?
The sheriff has the authority to do that. He doesn't.
Yeah,
he's going to drive up my driveway.
No, he can see your plate from the curb,
and takes a picture.
Yeah. Or you can see your plate at the local school where you're dropping kids off.
But let's come back to this thing. If the sheriff currently has authority, why do we need legislative action at this point in time? Why is this between the voters and the sheriff and says you have the authority, do your job? Why do we need legislative action?
Well, because the job is not being done.
But that's between the constituents and the sheriff.
Yeah, and in the meantime, the job's not being done.
Would another law make the sheriff...
Well, does the current law allow for fining, I guess, is the question. Because this specifically says the law enforcement can levy the fine.
We have some laws on the books that says, don't do this, it's illegal, but there's no penalty. And so they say, oh, I'm not supposed to do that. Okay, so what?
So this law would allow the sheriff to fine somebody after 60 days. Currently, the sheriff cannot do that?
Right.
There's your difference, Bill.
Okay.
So what does the current law allow the sheriff to do then?
The current law says the sheriff can say, okay, go get your plates.
Don't you get a ticket?
There's been a financial penalty associated with this. I don't know just what it is, but it has been.
Well, for not getting your plates, there certainly is a financial penalty for the state and the citizens because they're not getting that income.
Well, having just moved, it's been a while. It's been 3 years now, but having just moved here, I know that there was a clock ticking, and we felt pressure to change things out. Because I don't remember what the penalties are, because we do it anyway, right?
Right.
But there's.
This was Craig Blair introduced and got something passed maybe 7, 8, 9 years so ago that they gave him some relief, but within a period of time
you're selling a car
and also buying a car
and buying
a car. So
relieved it from some of the tax station.
Yeah, but so that was supposed to address some of this problem.
That helped a little.
But I think the sheriff has the authority, Larry.
Sheriff has the authority to say, "Hey, do this." Now, to give some leeway to the sheriff has a lot of other responsibilities. Violent crime, they have tax department responsibilities, and we don't have enough law enforcement personnel in the sheriff's department to do everything. But it just has not been a priority for the sheriff's department, at least in Berkeley County.
But over the last several years, I know of 3 or 4 county commissioners that have run on this issue.
Mm-hmm.
I've known of at least 1 or 2 assessors that have run on this issue. And a couple of sheriffs have run on this issue as well. But nothing's happened.
Well, it harkens me back to last Monday when John Gilstrap was pointing out that he didn't become a famous author overnight. He was persistent. Same thing with legislation. Persistence, persistence, persistence. And after you're done being persistent, you have to be persistent some more.
Do you sense in Charleston, is there overall resistance to new legislation, to passing new laws? Because every new law brings in consequence, and we get into the point where commas matter, and it's the opportunity for, like, say, even the vehicular homicide.
Right.
I understand that one of the issues there was people were worried that accidents would become criminalized.
Right.
So is that kind of a theme? Because,
well, yeah, and one of them, the catchphrases that I use is beware of unintended consequences with legislation. So whenever any legislation is passed, generally it takes, it didn't happen this way with vehicular homicide. We got it through in 2 sessions. But generally it takes 5 or 6 years to get people used to the idea. Like a lot of things, people don't like change. And you got these different legislators, they all got their different agendas, and they say, well, wait a minute, what's this new thing? We've got this other stuff we're working on. So it takes a while to get the attention. And keep in mind, we're a citizen legislature, so we only meet for several months a year, and there's a lot of pressure and a lot of bills going on, and lots of times a lot of things fall to the floor and don't get acted on. One of the things that's a pet peeve of mine, and again, a committee chairman has been the holdup on this, is the homestead exemption, $20,000 a year credit for those who are senior citizens. That's been in the Constitution for 30 or 40 years.
Never adjusted for
Never
inflation.
adjusted. And legislation is put in every year, and I've been one of them to say, let's change that. Now, I don't like the fact that a dollar amount's in the Constitution. That's just asking for problems. To change the Constitution, it takes a 2/3 vote. And my legislation says, instead of 20,000, it just says not less than 20,000. If that was voted 2/3 by the legislature and then by the people, then the legislature could adjust that. But every year I put in this legislation, and one person has stymied it, and that's the chairman of the Finance Committee.
Vernon Criss.
Vernon Criss doesn't want to handle it.
Yeah, that would be beneficial to Eastern Panhandle residents, especially senior citizens.
Oh yeah, if you just do it on an inflationary basis, it would be an incredible boon for senior citizens.
and what that does in this case, $20,000 off the assessed value of the house for taxation purposes?
That's correct.
Okay.
And it's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a big deal in the southern part of the southern part of the state? And why is Chris reluctant to this?
I don't know.
Well, it costs money.
Well, that's my question, I guess.
One of the jobs of a finance committee chairman, and Jason Baird can attest to this too, is your biggest job is to say no, because everybody has their hands out, and everything that they put in the finance committee has an impact on the budget. But Chris has just been adamant. He's not going to give it a hearing. If it would be given a hearing, I think it would sail through the House and the Senate with the 2/3 majority easily.
Yeah, Larry, you've been a elected delegate for what, 3 terms, 4 terms?
Four terms now.
Are you going to compete with John Overton for 32 years? Or what are your other plans? What are the other plans?
But I'm going to stand up and speak out on behalf of good governance as long as I can breathe in and breathe out. What I'm going to do in the future, I don't know. I haven't decided for 26. I've had some people ask me to consider running for another office. I've been considering whether or not I should run or not. My wife is severely disabled, in a lot of pain, but she's adamant that I continue to serve, so it's a matter I'm going to have to give some prayer to.
You mentioned another office. What would that be?
I've been asked to run for the Berkeley County Commission.
Okay.
There are just a couple of minutes left in regards to your bill to move school board elections to the general instead of the primary.
Yeah, I have a couple reasons for that. Number one, low voter turnout. a lot of people don't vote in the primary. If it was in the general election, I think we get more voter turnout and we get more interest and participation in that election. It hasn't gone anywhere. We support is building on that, but there's some problems. Some school board folks, education people are really concerned that don't upset the apple cart. Nobody likes change. And sometimes, for instance, one of the bills that passed, which I've been working on since I first was elected, was to allow municipal elections, not to allow, to require them to be the same date as state and federal elections. A lot of resistance on that, but when the bill finally came to a vote through the committee, it passed unanimously. It just makes sense.
But to this point, you've not had any success moving the school board elections to the general.
Not yet, but not giving up on it. Sooner or later, something's going to give.
Minute left. What's something else you're working on that you'd like to see get through next year?
Well, let me give a shout out to, in fact, just this morning I put a refreshed biography of myself up on my website, larrykump.com. You can look at that and see what I'm all about. Some of the things I'm looking forward to is school board, changing school board elections, making people more accountable for their out-of-state license tags, and always reducing and eliminate the personal income tax in West Virginia.
Very quickly, school board, changing school board. You thinking about going from nonpartisan to partisan?
No, I'm talking about changing from primary to general election.
Outstanding. Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to see partisan school board elections?
You know, originally I said, no, let's keep it nonpartisan. But people do get confused. Unfortunately, people want to see the R or the D beside the name. So I'm not as strong on that as I was, but I really think it would help better if we just moved the election to the general election rather than the primary.
Larry, thank you for coming in today.
Thank you for having me. It was nice being had.